my daddy, Bill Hunt, proudly pointing to his name along the University of Tennessee's Athletic Walk of Fame. It was built in the year 2000. There's my mother and daddy seated at the head table as daddy was being inducted into the Knoxville Sports Hall of Fame in July 1993. As you can tell, it was one of his proudest moments. In order to learn how he earned and received such prestigious awards, let's go back to 1920, the year my daddy was born. The First World War, the war that was supposed to end all wars and make the world safe for democracy, had been over only a couple of years. Some local World War I veterans were raising funds to erect a doughboy statue in front of Knoxville High School to honor the boys who died in that war. Nearby at 112 Castle Street on the 16th of April 1920, William David Hunt, my father, was born to Chester and Edna Everhart Hunt.
I had three brothers, Ed, Edward, James, and Robert. Edward was a great prankster. He said the doctor found me under a toadstool or a rock in the backyard.
Chester had met Edna in January of 1906. In June, they were married. Chester was a printer with the Knoxville News Sentinel newspaper. In addition to his brothers, my daddy had lots of cousins to play with. Now that's him on the left. The dark-haired older boy in the back of the row on the right is his older brother, Robert. I don't know whose uniform that is. It could belong to his older cousin, Charles Ware, because that's Charles's sister, Gladys, standing next to him. Daddy was just 5 years old. Now the next year, Daddy started school in Park City Lowry Elementary in Knoxville. And this is his report card. In 1929, the year of the stock market crash that ushered in the Great Depression, his mother Edna posed for this portrait with her 4 sons. Now that's the oldest, Edward, on the left, James is in the middle, Robert is on the right, Billy, my dad, is sitting on the arm of the chair.
The family were members of Fifth Avenue Baptist Church, and we were, all the boys here were Boy Scouts in Troop 17, East Fifth Avenue Baptist Church, on East Fifth Avenue, naturally.
Between playing with his brothers and neighborhood kids, Daddy soon learned that sports would be his passion.
Junior high was 7th, 8th, and 9th grades. Brand new junior high school, Park Junior, where I excelled in sports. Actually, I excelled in all sports, everything you could think of in sports. And in Knoxville High School, 10th, 11th, and 12th grades.
My daddy contributed greatly to the dynasty that was the Knoxville High School Trojans. He was named to the All-Star, All-Knoxville High School team. That was quite an honor considering the limited number of players selected during the school's 41-year existence, from 1910 to 1951. He played on the 1937 football team that was undefeated in 11 games. They won the city, state, southern, and the National High School Football Championship. The 1937 Trojans scored 275 points while holding their opponents to only 38 points. Although he was part of a national championship football team, football wasn't my daddy's best sport. While at Knoxville High School, he held 3 state track records, including one for the 440-yard dash. He was also named Outstanding City League softball player, and that was back when players wore small gloves similar to this one. His first love, though, was basketball. While still in his junior year at Knoxville High School, Daddy was center on the basketball team. The 1937 Trojan basketball team advanced to the state championship, but they lost that game. It was a heartbreaking loss. They had come so close. When school was out 3 months later, Quentin, who was a baseball buddy of Daddy's and also a wrestler at the University of Tennessee, tried to get Daddy's mind off that loss and to cheer him up. And he talked Daddy into hitchhiking with him out to California to see relatives. My daddy's oldest brother, Edward, was living near Oakland in Alameda at the time, and Quentin Householder, he had an uncle in Glendale.
So we got us a job at A&P store and other places and saved up $15 a piece. And I told my mother and daddy I was hitchhiking with Quentin to California. Well, they didn't seem to object to anything. Mama, she didn't know anything about perception of distance or time, so she thought I'd just go down there to the corner and see Edward and come on back for supper.
They started out at 4 o'clock in the morning on the 30th of June, 1937. Apparently getting rides wasn't much of a problem, and in between rides they took turns taking pictures of each other.
We traveled from Louisville, St. Louis, through Kansas, stopped at a little shack out there in Kansas, and we stand there after we'd cleaned up in the filling station bathroom. We got run out of there too for dirty in the bathroom.
If you recall, these two naive adventurers left Knoxville, Tennessee before dawn on June 30th, 1937. They were in Boise, Idaho by the end of the day on the 4th of July. Daddy says most of the town was celebrating, so they didn't seem to notice them. They strolled into a park and they covered themselves up with a few maps that they had and tried to sleep. Apparently it was too cold because about 2 o'clock in the morning they decided to try their luck again at hitchhiking.
We got up and we saw this car coming up the highway right there toward town, and I stood right out in the middle of the road like a knothead and flagged him down. There's two boys heading for Portland, Oregon. And they said, you guys can get in that rumble seat, you can go with us. So you talk about the rumble seat, tight squeeze. Anyway, we squeezed in, put the luggage down under our feet, and sat there all frozen. It was freezing cold, and drove all night long, and wound up down there to Columbia River Basin into Portland, Oregon.
From Oregon, they headed south. Their next memorable stop was in Eureka, California.
We found a resort hotel, had the golf course and everything in there. And it was late at night, and two kids were there. One was the bellhop, and the other one was the clerk. And they built a big old fire in the fireplace and brought us some cover, and we slept on two big couches there in their lobby. And then the next morning they took us to the kitchen, fed us breakfast.
That may have been the best night's sleep they'd had so far.
We called Edward. He told us how to get to his house. We caught a ferry there we went to Alameda from Frisco. And we stayed with Edward for about a week, I guess. And then we decided to head on out down the coast. So we got on down. We stayed with Quentin's uncle. He's a projector manager of the Grauman Chinese Theater. He took us all over to all the places, Forest Lawn Cemetery, and also the planetarium. Showed us the stars, all that.
Then Daddy and Quentin went their separate ways. Quentin went to a DeMolay convention in Mississippi, and Daddy, thanks to his brother Edward for getting him a plane ticket, was flying home.
And then flew from there to New York by way of Chicago, where I stayed 3 days with a friend I met on board the airplane, a United Airlines mainliner, and got in New York City. And I visited my cousin Marie Ware, and Aunt Zena and Grandma Hunt were living there in this little apartment. So I got me a room at the Y. And that next day I found out that my cousin, Lieutenant Charles Rollins Ware, had just graduated from Annapolis the year before. And he was in town on the USS Texas. So he came over to see Aunt Zena and me and Marie, and he took Marie and me out to the battleship, took us tour from one end of that battleship to the other. And then that night we had a big dinner on board, and they had a big show with the movie stars.
Daddy didn't know it at the time, but it would be the last time he saw his cousin Charles. Lieutenant Ware became one of the posthumous heroes in the Battle of Midway in June of 1942. He was honored with the Navy Cross, and a new destroyer was named for him. Meanwhile, back in New York, after the wining and dining Daddy enjoyed with his cousins, he headed off for home.
But it took me 3 days to get from New York to Knoxville. I got stranded so many times down the highway there.
Daddy says when he arrived home, dog-tired and with only 37 cents in his pocket, his mother was making dinner. And all she did was look up at him and ask him if he'd eaten that day. He'd been gone 52 days, and that, he says, was his welcome home. When September rolled around, Daddy was eager to get back to school. Well, maybe not to school, but to basketball. He and the rest of the team still had some unfinished business. They wanted the state championship that they had so narrowly missed the year before. So, in 1938, as captain of the Trojans, Daddy accepted that vote of confidence by breaking the state scoring record and leading his team to the Tennessee High School Basketball Championship.
I graduated in June 1938. I had a scholarship, and I took a basketball scholarship at the University of Florida. And I was captain of the freshman basketball team, stayed there till I got homesick. And Coach Barnhill gave me a track scholarship at the University of Tennessee because it was prohibited to play the same sport, two different schools that belonged to the same conference.
His love of sports, whether it was organized or impromptu with his friends, gave him the passion and the energy to try it all, including a long walk across America. This is the path he took that led him to being inducted into the Knoxville Sports Hall of Fame. And 2 years later, his name was included in the University of Tennessee's Walk of Fame. Daddy was one of many athletes who contributed to the winning reputation of the UT Volunteers, of which he was and still is proud to be a part of. For years, he and my mother were avid attendees at all UT football games in Knoxville. During that time, they collected quite a wardrobe of orange and white. And as they would say, go Vols!